But yeah, I somehow missed like 2 years worth of Facebook messages. And I felt terrible about this because I was like, as I said, I was like somebody who's always trying to respond to people. And so that's why I felt bad. So hopefully we can rectify that.
You're listening to Writer Unblocked, the podcast for serious authors who are ready to scale their careers with smart strategy. I'm Nicole, your host, and I help authors navigate publishing, marketing, and multi-format expansion, all while keeping the vibe high. Today on Writer Unblocked, I'm joined by the legendary audiobook narrator Edoardo Ballerini. You've heard his voice for hundreds of hours and seen him on screen, but today he's here with me answering the fan messages he accidentally missed for 2 years. It's heartfelt, hilarious, and a powerful reminder of how much stories and voices can mean. Additional information, of course, is available in the show notes or writeronblockpodcast.com. Okay, let's dive in. Edoardo Ballerini. Hello, and thank you for agreeing to come on my podcast.
It's my pleasure.
We are here with a different kind of interview today because you and I were talking as a result of a social media post you had up a few weeks ago regarding fan messages. And I did not know this about you, but you are quite serious about answering your fan messages.
I try to answer every message I get. And look, let's be fair. It's not like I have thousands a day or anything. It's not like some outrageous avalanche of messages coming my way. But I do think I've always felt this way. And this goes all the way back to when people would actually write letters, which, that's how long I've been doing this. People would write letters. I would write them handwritten letters back. And what's really interesting is that people like many, many years later would say, oh, I still have your letter from, 2002 or something. I was like, oh, that's so sweet. And in some cases, I actually sort of like had this like almost like pen pal relationship with people, which is very cool. It was often like younger people who were like, how do I get started? Or I want to be a writer. I want to be an actor, whatever. And we would write back and forth and it was very cool. So I always told myself, you got to answer everything that comes in. But then I dropped the ball.
Let's talk about how you dropped the ball. Okay, so you posted that you discovered through Facebook Messenger that you had missed many, many messages.
It was like 2 years worth of messages.
Well,
and let me explain.
Yes.
Because, all right, so there's this phenomenon called social media. I don't know if people have heard of this, right? And one of the things with social media is like there's a new platform every 6 months. There's a new app. There's a spin-off app. There's this, that, the other. And so, like everybody, I started on Facebook. Then I made my way over to Twitter. And then there was Instagram. And then suddenly this thing popped up called Facebook Messenger, which I didn't quite understand. And I was like, all right, okay. Yet somehow I'd managed to download this onto my phone. I had it as an app, but I didn't quite understand that Facebook Messenger was slightly apart from Facebook. And so that's where your messages would actually show up. And so I would see comments on Facebook posts and I would respond to those. But yeah, I somehow missed like 2 years worth of Facebook messages. And I felt terrible about this because I was like, as I said, I was like somebody who's always trying to respond to people. So
who was the first person you told, like, guess what I just figured out?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the first thing I did was post that sort of apology video where I was like, I'm so sorry, everybody,
That video popped up on my feed. I'm like, oh no. And it was just so sweet of you to be like, I am so deeply sorry. And then I had this moment of you and I were going to have lunch. And I thought, wouldn't it be really nice to actually get to answer some of these messages during the episode?
Because I haven't actually answered all the messages. That's the other thing I have to confess. And what I have discovered, and this is interesting about fan mail and fan messages, is that it means a lot to the people who are writing you, right? It really does. People want to have this connection with people they see on screens or, who they listen to as audiobooks or whatever it is. And so when you don't answer them, it actually kind of stings them. It's like, well, why didn't this guy write me back? I see that he's posting stuff. I see he's, out there doing stuff, but he's not getting back to me. And so that's why I felt bad. So hopefully we can rectify that.
No, we're going to rectify this today. I have a favorite or two, but before I start, do you have a particular one that jumped out at you while you were scrolling through all those messages?
Oh my God, there was one. I don't know if I sent them all to you. Some of them were a little biting, actually, which I thought was really funny. And
Oh yeah.
I actually thought that those were the kind of the best ones, right?
Yes, so we're gonna read at
Right.
least one of those,
Right.
which was short and sweet and critical.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But I want to start with my absolute favorite, and for context, why it's my favorite. I, as you know, worked for Audible for many, many years, but I got my start there in customer care. So I actually was on the phone daily,
Right.
daily with folks. And I got to know people through what they listened, through the kinds of technical issues they were having. And sometimes while we were waiting for the system to load, they would tell me things. It was really nice to form a relation, like that kind of relationship you're talking about with
Yeah.
the listener and the consumer. And I remember getting this phone call from a young woman, and she was calling to cancel her mother's Audible
Oh,
membership. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, but I need her to talk to her. I can't cancel it,
right.
you know, for you." And she said, "Oh no, she passed away."
Oh,
And I said, I'm so sorry." And we have a protocol for that. And when I pulled up the woman's account, the last message she had sent us at Audible was thanking us for the service because she was very ill, and the only way she could really have relief from her pain and illness
mm,
was listening to audiobooks. So I cried at work reading
yeah.
that. It was very touching, and it was one of those things where you're like, you always want your job to be like you're saving lives and you're saving the world and you're making some sort of impact.
Right.
And I realized that books, and in particular audiobooks, are so important. And so everyone from the writer, the narrator,
Hmm.
the folks like myself who were just helping people with their membership,
Yeah.
issues or questions, every one of us is playing a really important role in bringing something impactful to people. So that was a really big moment for me.
Yeah, I understand that. I've gotten so many messages over the years from people saying similar things, like how important this stuff, especially audiobooks. There's an intimacy to audiobooks. You and I know this, that is different from film and TV, because it's usually one voice and one listener, and they share this space. And it's different from a film or television, which, it's got this cast, it's got all these effects, it's got all this stuff. There's something very intimate about this one-on-one relationship that you have. And I've gotten similar kind of messages. People have said like, "Oh, you helped me get through my divorce." Or similar things were like, "Oh, a parent died and I was grieving and I was listening to things you recorded and it was so helpful to me." And so there's really something quite beautiful in this space that doesn't exist anywhere else. And that's also why I feel it's so important to respond to people.
Exactly. Well, we are going to respond to this. Message is a little long, but I do want to read the
Okay.
entire thing.
Okay.
So here we go. Miss message number one.
Okay.
Hello, Eduardo. This is Rebecca in the Seattle area. I'm not sure if it's better to write you here rather than on X, but I wanted to send you my greetings and immense gratitude. Your voice has been a saving grace this month as I've listened to 102 hours and 28 minutes. Yes, you read that correctly. Of your excellent narration while trying to heal my broken back.
Mhm.
You've made me forget my pain, forget to sleep, be thoroughly entertained, and transported to times and adventures beyond my prior imagining. I started the month with Robert Swartwood's The Killing Room, which you kindly
Yeah.
let us know was the Audible Daily Deal. I finished it that day and then dove into Robert McCammon's incredible Matthew Corbett series, which you
Mhm.
mentioned in your 5 favorite books you've narrated.
Mhm.
Rarely have 30 hours sped by so quickly as when I listened to Speaks the Nightbird.
Mhm.
I'm now near the end of The River of Souls and have already downloaded Freedom of the Mask. I'm fascinated by the way we as artists give our performances and rarely know how our words, portrayals, inflections, tone, spirit, and expressions might affect our audience. How
Mhm.
the sound of our voice might reach the deep into their sorrow or joy and be balm or trigger.
Yeah.
Well, you've unknowingly been a great balm and means of escape from a very challenging time in my life. I thought I'd let you know how much the extraordinary work you did years ago has helped me through it all right now. You are gifted beyond measure, Eduardo, and I hope you and your beautiful family are happily thriving. Love to all.
Wow. Well, thank you, Rebecca. And I'm so sorry that I did not get back to you. Um, yeah, this is exactly the kind of thing we were talking about, where people are in a place of need and they're in a place of pain, and they connect to these things that we create, and it means a lot to them. And it's kind of typical of a lot of messages I've gotten, where people are in these sort of places where they need something to lift them out. And we often, I think, forget of this important role that we play. What's interesting to me about the Robert McCammon books is that they were done at Audible, probably around the time I met you. And they became so important to me because, so we'd started one of them, and then my son was born. And so all of a sudden I had a newborn, and I was shuttling out to Newark, and I was so tired, and I was recording these books, and they just sort of took on this whole world and meaning to me. Because, when you have a child, like, the world just becomes more alive all of a sudden. Like, you see
Yes.
everything differently, you feel everything differently. And so those books became so important to me. And I'm so glad to hear that they've resonated with people over the years. And to Rebecca, I hope your back is better. I hope you're feeling well. And please, feel free to write again, and I'll try to respond. I will say to people that you can also write me directly through my website, which those I always do see. And so, but that's a
I was
beautiful
going to say, website is more, yes. I also tell authors when they're building their brand, have
Right.
a newsletter, have a website with a way for folks to contact you,
Yeah.
because PSA, you don't own your social accounts. Those platforms can go
Right.
down at any time. You don't own your
Right.
followers. You don't own any
Right.
of that stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So I also, yes, if Rebecca, if you want to write Eduardo again, because you were at 102 hours and 28 minutes, so I would love to know what the tally is today.
That's a lot. Yeah.
That's a lot. We're gonna jump around a little bit. Oh,
Sounds
this
like
one, okay, this is my second favorite because it is a rapid fire questionnaire.
oh, okay.
Here we go. First of all, I'm not sure if you received my DMs. Could you please let me see it? Maybe they meant, could you please let me know?
Right. Right.
My first question is, what is your favorite song to go all out in karaoke? You like dancing? How often do you do it? What is the one item of clothing you couldn't live without? What
Mhm.
fragrance or perfume do you wear? What is the part of your body that you like the most? What was
Okay.
your first job and how did you get it? How old were you when you had your first kiss? How was it? Is there
Okay.
something you like to collect? How often do you cook? What do you like to cook the most?
Wow.
I know that you like soccer and that you support your son in his games, but do you also play? Have you been on a team? Did you travel to Mexico? What places do you know of that country?
Wow.
Those are
Now,
a lot of questions. I'm not going to have you answer
yeah,
all of
I,
them.
I, I can't remember all of them now. But this actually begs an interesting point when it comes to this kind of communication, right? Which is that, so sometimes people want to know a lot of things about you, right? And we post things, and we post personal things, we post things about our families, we post things about our lives, and we've definitely opened the door to saying, hey people, this is my life and I'm inviting you into it. But then at the same time, you're like, well, I also have to kind of, have a little guardrail up here about how much I share. I'm certainly not going to answer the question about my favorite body part, because first of all, I don't exactly know what that would be. But do you know what I mean? Like, there's that line between, like, wanting to be open and sharing with people, and also wanting to say, well, certain things are private, right?
Exactly. And I did the spectrum of the questions
Yeah,
in this particular message
yeah,
caught me a little bit off guard because they went from,
yeah.
I love the first question. Okay, so maybe we can answer the first question. What is your favorite song to go
Right.
all out in karaoke? Do you even like
So I don't
karaoke?
I don't think I've done karaoke for about 20 years, but I will say this, that I do play guitar, and I like, what happens is I try to learn a new song, and so what I do is I kind of get obsessed with that one song, and I'll play it over and over and over. Probably my family would wish I would just, like, move on to a new song, because they hear me for, like, days and days, if not weeks and weeks, playing the same song. So right now I can share this, that I'm trying to learn. It's a Rolling Stones song called Moonlight Mile. And it has a very cool bluesy kind of guitar thing. And so I've been playing that sort of morning till night. What I do is I have my guitar, like it's hanging on the wall. And so I'll just grab it. And like, if the kids are getting ready to go to school, I'll just sort of noodle around on it and just play for a bit. Then by the time they come back and I've finished like a recording session or whatever, I'm still back on the guitar. So they probably think I've just been playing it all day.
My dad just been on his guitar all day.
Right. Does he work? I don't know. So that's kind of the way it is with music for me, is I get fixated on a song until I feel like I've learned it, and then I move on to another song. And they'll come at me randomly. Like I'll listen to music in the car, and then I'll hear something that maybe I haven't heard in a long time, and I'll be like, oh, that'd be a good song. Like, because I'm only at a certain level of guitar proficiency, so I need to find something that challenges me a little bit, but it's something that I could probably achieve playing. So,
are you self-taught?
Oh my God, I probably took some lessons when I was like a teenager or something, but largely self-taught. Yeah.
Practice is more important than official lessons.
But music's very important. I feel like it's very important. I also feel like it's very important for audiobook narrators, that we need to have a musicality in our head, right? I mean, language and music, I think, are very, very similar. They have these rhythms, they have these sounds. And so I feel like playing music actually helps me when I get into the booth.
I was going to say the rhythm of narration is really important, because I have listened to audiobooks where it wasn't the voice or the story that was not quite right. It was the rhythm of the narration, which is really interesting. Well, there was one other question in this bag of questions that I really liked, which was, what was your first job?
My first job. I wonder if that refers to acting job or any kind of job. So a little history about me that people may not know is that I was actually very, very briefly a child actor. And I was in a play at Theater for the New City on 2nd Avenue when I was about 10, 11, 12, something like that. I was very young. And it actually started to kind of take off where I got an inquiry from one of the networks to do a studio test for a show. And we went up to the offices. It was my mother and I, and we were sitting in this office, and it was right before my test. And she didn't kind of like the vibe. And so she said, we're not doing this. And so that was kind of the end of my childhood acting career, which is probably a good thing. I will give her credit.
A mother's instinct.
Yeah, I think she could just see this whole like child acting world was probably not great. But my first job actually was on stage. And then if you're talking about later in life, like post-college, I did all kinds of stuff like everybody did. I waited tables. I was a temp. I think at one point I was like parking somebody's car for like $50 a month. I was like responsible for their like alternate side parking kind of thing. So that was the usual bag of, early acting career jobs. But I did actually start as an actor as a child.
Wow. I did not know that about you. And I'm a big fan. Yeah. See, you learn something new. Speaking of, here's one. I'm a huge fan. I hope one day I'll have the privilege of meeting you in person. Not sure how. Haha. My husband said he'd even take me wherever it may be. So you've got husbands willing to drive their spouses to meet you wherever.
Yeah, this is funny because these questions I'm realizing fall into like little categories.
Yes.
And so this is an interesting one where I don't know if this is actually true, but I heard once that audiobooks, the listeners of audio, it was more women than men listening to audiobooks. I don't know if this is true. And that may have changed as the industry has grown. But so a lot of fan mail and emails and whatever were coming from women. And there was this like running joke that a lot of different people had, which was like, ha ha, I don't tell my husband that you and I spend so much time together. And like some would go even further, like, ha ha, you were with me in my bed last night, and I was like, okay, we're getting on that edge now where maybe we shouldn't be, responding to these kind of messages.
It's the guardrails again.
It's the guardrails again, but it definitely is a category of thing where women will say, I spend a lot of time with you. Shh, don't tell my husband. And I'm like, okay.
Well, see, this husband's willing very willing to drive.
Well, that's a good husband.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to drive him or her
Right.
to meet you.
Right.
Here's here's another one that's I think starts off great, and then I'm always taken aback by the last part. Good morning. Watching The Experimenter. What a great movie.
Mm,
Excellent acting on your part.
mm.
Where are you located?
Right. That's another one, I love this because I hadn't really thought of it in these terms, but they are falling into these categories, right? Where people want to know kind of like where they can meet you, where you're going to be. And, I do events like a lot of people, and I tell people when I'm doing events, like I go to literary festivals, I do readings, I do interviews with authors. None of this is hidden, right? Obviously, we want people to come. And so I tell people, I've never had any incident or problem with anybody coming up to me. But I certainly do a number of events in New York City with authors, often interviewing them. And people are welcome to come by. I would love to meet people. It's just, as long as they're, not insane, that would be good. So,
Exactly.
right, right.
Not insane is a nice requirement.
Right, right.
Here's one I love. Your voice, perfect diction, enunciation, eloquence. Is this something that stems from your origins and upbringing, or is it a result of training and practice? Phenomenal either way.
That's a good question. So I'm bilingual. I grew up speaking both English and Italian. And my parents are both academics. My father, in fact, is a linguist. And so I remember as a kid around the table, there was always a lot of talk of language. And there was a lot of attention paid to the spoken word. In fact, my father's a poet, and he would bring me to readings and I would listen to people. So in this bizarre way, I had this sort of upbringing that was kind of pointing me towards this work that I didn't really quite understand when I was a kid. But there was a lot of discussion of language. There was a lot of discussion of sound. I was going to readings. And I do think that being bilingual helps in this way. Some people have said I have kind of a transatlantic kind of accent, which I'm not
Yes.
sure is necessarily the case. But I think what they're latching onto is that I don't sound like your typical American who kind of slurs a lot of words. Americans tend to leave off the last T or the last G, and I don't do that naturally. And so, but it's not something I trained for necessarily. It's just something that was always a part of my life.
That's interesting to hear. I'm bilingual also. English is my
Yeah,
second language, and it's true when you have a bilingual brain, you treat language a little differently.
I think so.
And
Yeah.
it's funny because I feel pretty Americanized, but once in a while I meet with someone who immediately picks up on it and is like, where are you, where are you from?
Right,
Or,
right.
because I don't hear it in myself anymore, but a person who's attuned to language will hear it and say, I detect an accent. Or, oh, of course, if
Right.
you're, I don't know if you're like, it's very cliche, but it's true for me. If you're angry or very
For sure.
happy,
Right.
your accent will change a little bit
Of
because,
course. Right. That's but no, I think it's important to actually study languages, especially if you want to be doing, work that is about language, and so I was fortunate that it was just a part of, you probably have this phenomenon too, which I always used to joke about is like, so when I was a kid, I went back and forth between Italy and the US a lot more than I do now. I would spend my summers there and then my school year here. And it was always like when I was in Italy, I was the American. And when I was in New York, I was the Italian. It was always like the other guy somehow.
yes,
And so it
yes, yes.
creates this identity, which for a long time I found kind of unnerving somehow. It's like, well, where do I belong? I'm always in the wrong place. Right. But
I
then
have
no, go ahead.
sorry. It just really resonates because you're neither from here, you're
Right.
neither from here. It's like I'm not fully. Sometimes I feel like I'm not fully accepted by Americans, and then if I am among Dominicans, I'm not Dominican enough. So
Right.
it's just like
Sure.
this sort of like where am I? I'm in between.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what I'm talking about. I've gotten to a place, and I hope you're there as well, is where I actually think it's a good thing,
Oh yeah.
right? Where I feel like, what, this actually makes me unique, right?
Yes.
It makes me more interesting. It means that there's only really one of me. And so I like it. But for a long time, it was difficult.
What I really enjoy about it, and this is will result in a follow-up question for you is, I enjoy that I consume double the content. And in particular, when I read content that was originally written in my language, I take great pleasure because even in the best of translations, it's just not the same.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. What is the balance between you consuming Italian or content, whether reading or watching movies versus
I
English?
listen to a lot of Italian podcasts.
Oh, you do?
I do. And one of the reasons I do that is because I want to keep the language alive in my head. I like to have it on a daily basis. As I said, when I was a kid, I used to spend 3 months a year there, right? And so that was like total immersion. I was just in the culture. I had my friends. I lived there. And now, I only get over there a few weeks a year, if that. And so one of the things that's important to me is I listen to podcasts. Um, it can be news podcasts, it can be like sports podcasts, it can be I like photography. There's some photography podcasts that are in Italian, and so it's like stuff that I would have consumed in English anyway, but I just listen to it in Italian, and that I find that keeps me on my toes.
I love that. I do the same thing. I retain a lot of my native language by consuming the content. It's a good
Well,
way to
with
keep it.
Spanish, there's obviously a much greater opportunity. Yeah,
Yes, there's a lot more programming
yeah,
here, and a lot more things get translated
yeah.
immediately.
Right. With Italian, you have to kind of seek it out. But it's there. I mean, it's all there. You
Right.
just go on any platform and there's a ton of Italian podcasts. So
That's great. That's great. Okay, here's a short, sweet, and critical one.
yeah,
I
I knew we were
had
going to
to
get to
laugh.
this. Yeah.
I had to laugh when I read this one. I want you to know
Hmm.
that what you did with the Carl Ove books was a crime. You should be tried in The Hague. Ruined it.
Yeah.
So talk to me about these books.
Okay.
What?
So Karl Ove Knausgaard is a Norwegian writer who wrote these fantastic books called My Struggle. They were 3,600 pages long. It took years to record. They became a big hit in audio, I have to say. Um, there was an article written about me in The Guardian in London about them. There was another one written in a Norwegian paper. Karl Ove, wrote me some lovely notes calling me his American voice. And they were a big success, I have to say. A lot of people, because the books were so long and so dense, a lot of people preferred them in audio.
Right.
And so I would say 99.9% of the feedback that I've gotten about these books was positive, very positive. People, in fact, saying like, I never could have gotten through these books if I hadn't been listening to you. Like it was like a 133-hour monologue, basically, right? So I was acting this part. Then there's this guy, and there's been others too with other books who they hate what you've done, right? Something that was so precious to them, it meant so much to them, and they heard it a certain way when they read it. And then they listened to what I did, and it wasn't the same thing. And for some reason, it ruined it for them.
Wait,
There's nothing.
He wrote ruined it! Exclamation
Oh,
point.
okay, great. So I'm quoting directly. Um, there's nothing I can do about that, obviously. And I have learned over the years that you're never going to be able to please everybody. That's just the case. And if you're going to be in the public sphere, you have to develop a kind of thick skin about this. Very early on in my career, when I was only doing screen stuff, there would be reviews in newspapers of the movies and the shows and whatever. And, sometimes the reviewers would take you to task and say, like, I just think this character was terrible and this actor was terrible in this part. And sometimes I remember even they would say, like, oh, it would have been better if they'd cast so-and-so in this role. And it kind of stung, right? But you have to learn to move beyond that. You have to learn to trust that if you're doing the best work that you can do, that's really all you can do. And then you have to let it sort of fall where it falls. Because again, there's no possible way that you're going to please everybody.
I think that is so, so, so important. And if you're an author listening, which is the
Mhm,
demographic for this podcast,
mhm.
I just really want them to absorb what you just said,
Yeah.
because it can be a very vulnerable thing to perform, whether it's writing, acting,
Sure.
narrating. And it's easier said than done. Like, yes, develop a thick skin, but you have to, because otherwise you can't go to pieces every time.
I imagine with authors, it's a little different in that, it's their work that they're putting out there. When you're the narrator or when you're playing a part in a movie, you're really the interpreter of somebody else's work, right? And in the case of like a movie, there's a director and there are other actors and there's the score and there's the cinematography and there's all kinds of stuff. As a narrator, it's a little more one-to-one with the material, but at a certain point, at a certain level, it's not your material, right? You are the interpreter of it. So I would imagine with the authors that follow this podcast, it's a little different because it is their work. This is
Right.
something that they created. It came from their soul. It came from their experiences. But the principle is the same, that you have to learn to separate the criticism. And unfortunately, in today's world where everybody's got their phone in their pocket and they're on these platforms, and they can say whatever they want and they hide behind this kind of mask of almost anonymity. You have to really let a lot of it go. Ultimately
Yeah,
you have to let all of it go, but
people can get quite brave and scathing.
yeah,
So that's a good point. Versus
yeah,
like, I'm going to take out a piece of paper, I'm going to write, I'm going to put a stamp on it, I'm going to go to the post office and mail
sure.
this letter.
It was a very different experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. This message I really, really love. My name is Ray Montecalvo. I'm a retired physician embarking on a second career as an audiobook narrator. I
Hmm,
want to tell you how much I enjoyed your performance of The Art Thief.
hmm.
I look forward to listening to your future work and wish you the best of luck. I love this so much. I love this so much to hear that, first off, they enjoyed your work
Yeah,
and your performance, but also that a retired physician would
yeah,
kind of pick up this craft.
yeah.
And I've always wondered that about narrators. Like some narrators, I'm always asking, like, did you, do you go to school for book
Right,
narration, or do you
right.
just sort of, some people just have a great voice and they don't really think about narrating a book, and then they have this whole career, like this gentleman here is a physician, and then suddenly they find themselves
Yeah,
in audiobook narration.
yeah. Well, as you know, this like audiobook world is exploding, and has been for a number of years. And so a lot of people, this is another sort of category of message that I get is I want to get started in this work. I always encourage people to do so. I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I try to point them to these opportunities. There are places, as you know, there are these platforms where you can, even if you have no experience, you can submit auditions for things. There are all kinds of things. I also tell people, and this is something that I've been doing, is that you can record public domain titles, and you can publish them. There is nothing to stop you, right? It's out there in the world, so you can become a kind of self-starter in this industry, and that can be a way to, first of all, see if you like the work, because
Right.
it's harder than people think, and also to see if like you can, actually make a dent in it and get going. And it's a way to get something out there. So I always encourage people to get started. This is a kind of touching note, the idea of a retiree saying, I want to come to this. And I think that's beautiful, and it's like he should go for it. And he didn't ask a specific question, but if he's out there and sees this, you're welcome to write me, and I'd be happy to have a conversation, via email about how to get started in this. I've done that for a number of people, especially during COVID, when audiobook narration was kind of the only game in town for actors for a while, during the acting strikes, which was very recent as well. So we had a kind of double whammy, and a lot of people started coming into this sphere. And it's funny because a lot of people would ask me like, well, do you find this sort of threatening to your livelihood? Do you find this to be competition that you don't want? And I always thought, I never think of it in those terms. Like,
Wait, meaning if more
if more
narrators
people
came
get
in.
into it, that there'll be less
Oh,
work for me, right? And I'm like, I don't think of it that way. It's like I helped people, build their home studios by advising them on equipment. Like, I'm like, let's go for it. Like, I'll help you, and someday you'll help me. And so, yeah, this idea that like, oh, we want to keep people out of this world, so there's, more for me. Like, I'd never kind of subscribed to that approach to things.
That's
Um,
great. Ray, if you're
yeah, and
listening.
and it's great. Well, first of all, it is a growing industry, and there is so much work out there to be done, and so I think there's a lot of room, and it seems like it just continues to grow year after year. I mean, it's
Oh,
like
yeah.
we've both been in this industry for roughly the same. We kind of came into it around the same time, and it was you remember it was tiny, right? It was like a handful of. You could have put the whole industry in like one room,
Yes.
and
We often did. Yes.
the revenue was fairly low, and and now it's become this sort of juggernaut, and it seems to grow by like double digits every year, which would suggest that there's room for people to come into this business. So,
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said about so you have a public domain collection
uh-huh.
on your website, and that's such
Yeah,
a great tip, right? So you don't have to wait for someone to give you
no.
an assignment. You can start
Yeah, I did it
with
just I
anything.
started just kind of for fun. It was during COVID. I was looking for some sort of comfort literature, and I started reading an old book by Jack London that I loved when I was in college. And I started reading it again, and I just thought, why don't I record it? Like it's public domain. I can just go downstairs. I have a studio. It's like, let me just record it. And so I did, and then I, found a platform to publish it through. Again, that's not very difficult. A quick Google search will show that there are many ways you can publish your audio work, um, and it'll get out there on the Audibles and Spotify's and Libros. You can have your work out there. And so I did one, and I thought, well, that was sort of satisfying, and it was a good thing to do. And then lo and behold, like I started getting some money for it, because I was actually selling it. And I was like, I wasn't trying, I wasn't like advertising, I wasn't doing anything. And I was like, huh, this is curious. So let me try another one. And so I did another one and again published it. And again, like I was like, oh, this is actually worth my time, right? To do these things, right? I'm not losing, on this. And so then I was like, well, let me just do more and more. I think I've done about a dozen now. And what I'm trying to do is do the shorter works, like things that are only maybe like 3 hours or 4 hours. I don't really have time to record Moby Dick, which is going to be
I was
like
gonna say, yeah, it's
20
super
hours.
long.
People were like, you should do Dickens. I was like, first of all, I'm not British. Second of all, it's like, those are so long. Um, but no, look, if you want to get into the audiobook world and you're not quite sure how to start, you can literally go find your favorite book that's in the public domain and record it. There is
That's
nothing to stop you.
no, that's really good. Really good advice. This is a little off topic, but I was talking to a producer this week, and we got to talking about AI.
Hmm.
And she said something I had not considered when we were talking about narrators cloning their voice or such. And she said, well, your voice changes as you age. And so one way to preserve how you sound
Oh,
right
right.
now, even if you
Right.
don't sell it or give it away, just to preserve it for yourself,
Right.
is to go ahead and do that.
Sure.
And I've never thought of it. Do you
Yeah.
feel your voice has changed, or
Oh,
have you
yeah.
given thought about that?
It has. I mean, I've been doing this work for about 15 years now, and it's not like I go back and listen to my recordings all the time. But if I do, for some reason, I can hear that, yes, I sound older. I sound, 15 years older. Just the same way that somebody, a teenager doesn't sound like somebody in their 30s, and somebody in their 30s doesn't sound like somebody in their 60s, and so on and so forth. The voice changes.
Right.
The idea of like preserving your voice, I get that. Although I would say that if you have a series of recordings done, you don't necessarily have to go create that AI version of your voice because you can use those old recordings later.
Right.
Right.
That would be basically the training ground
Yeah.
for.
It's like I could take books that I did in 2012 and say, like, make me that voice, a version of that voice. But your question of AI, you might be surprised to hear my answer to this, but I'm not totally opposed to AI in audiobooks. And the reason I say that is that I certainly don't want it to take work away from actors. And I certainly think that AI, that the uncanny valley is real and it's disconcerting, and we can always feel that artificiality. And so I don't think it's there. It might get there, I don't know. It might get so good in time that we can't tell the difference. But the reason I say that I'm not opposed to it is that, take, for example, like backlist titles that would never get a production just because there's a cost to making an audiobook. You have to pay an actor, you have to, have it edited, all this kind of stuff. But if you could take some old book that was never going to get made and have an audio version of it, even if it's not great, even if it's not 100% perfect, that's not a terrible thing, because a
Right.
lot of people have to listen, right? They some, physically can't read. Some have a lot of trouble reading the written word. And so they need the audio version. And so if there's a way to provide all this backlist material in audio and to do it quickly and cheaply, I don't think that's a terrible thing. Where I draw the line is, these companies that are like, let's just get rid of all these people and make ourselves a lot more money, right? Then you're
Right.
getting into a whole world of greed, which is not necessary. But I think there's a place for AI voices in audiobooks.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. This question says, and I wonder how often you get this, and if you've ever actually done this.
Hmm.
I'm reaching out to see if you'd be interested in doing my audiobook.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you're busy, but you're just so damn good at what you do. P.S. You're quite the interesting persona, and the visual matches the lovely voice.
Well, thank you. Um, yes, independent authors reach out to me and other narrators all the time. And I have done books for independent authors in the past. I do try to, have a look at the material and make sure that it's something that, I want to do and I think I can do a good job with. Sometimes, and this may surprise people too, sometimes I will turn something down simply because I don't think I'm the right person for it. Right? Somebody may say, "Oh, I love your work," but then they've written something that's not exactly what I do. And so it's like bad casting. And it's like, you wouldn't want me in that role. And so I've turned some things down that way, just because I don't think I would do, I think there'd be somebody better for it out there. So find that person. But yeah, people come to narrators all the time. And again, because there is this flexibility in the industry, there are ways for independent authors to connect with narrators and get their books done. There are these
Yeah.
platforms out there where they can get them out. And so, yeah, there's a few authors I've done like whole series for them. We have like relationships going back years where they write these series of books, and I've done them all the way through.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well,
And also, I'll just add this last thing. It's like I'm a big fan of people who are doing things independently. I want to help them and encourage them. I know that, the gatekeepers of the industry can be hard to get by. Sometimes it's like they're only, what are we down to? Like 4 publishers, 5 publishers? They keep
yeah, they keep
merging,
getting they keep
right?
merging.
Right. There used to be 20, now there's like 4. And it's like, if the idea is that you can only publish your book through one of these 4 companies, that makes it very difficult for people to get their work out there.
Yeah.
And this may surprise people too. It's like, I have been approached and I've done some books for independent authors. The books are great. I mean, they're
Oh,
really well written and they're
absolutely.
better than some of the stuff that I get through some of the major companies. Uh,
Absolutely. The ability to self-publish and then followed by the ability to self-publish audiobooks has been incredible. And there's so much more available now for
yeah.
readers and listeners
Yeah.
because of it. I agree.
I just don't
And
like this
some of
distinction that like, oh, an independent author means like they're bad somehow. Right. You know what I mean?
exactly. Exactly. There's this unfortunate stigma that doesn't sometimes seem to go away, but
I think
you
it's
can
breaking down though. I really
it
do.
it is, especially when you see who has come through as a self-published author that maybe later on, because of the popularity, they become traditional, but
Sure, then they get a deal with somebody, sure. But an example is Hugh Howey, who wrote the Silo books, which is now the Apple series. You
yes,
know,
we worked with him on ACX, and I saw that you are now the new voice
I
of the
did.
Wool
So they
series.
redid the audiobooks when it was becoming the Apple TV series. And he's a wonderful guy. I've met him. He self-published these books,
Yeah, he did.
many, many years ago. And he just had them out there on Amazon or whatever it was. And they suddenly sort of got this popularity going, 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 going. And now it's like a major TV show.
I
And then,
remember when they came out. Yeah, I remember because we reached out to get them done through ACX originally and have them self-publish them. Oh
yeah,
God, that was so long ago.
it was a long time ago, and then they got redone and republished and repackaged and all kinds of stuff. But this idea that like, oh, the independent author, or it's like saying like the independent filmmaker must be a bad filmmaker. It's like, well, no, actually, the independent filmmaker is often the most interesting filmmaker because they're not restricted by the studio.
I was gonna say they're not the restrictions are
Right.
not there, and they can take the creative
So
risks that sometimes we're not
to
allowed to.
authors, and I know authors is who you're primarily speaking to. Um, I really say that they should go for it, and they should find whatever opening they can to get their book out there. And then if it's good, I truly believe this. If it's good, it will find its audience.
Yes.
And that the cream rises to the top, and it will find its audience. So they should just, as opposed to saying, "Oh, Macmillan won't publish my book," they should just find another way to publish it.
Yeah. No, I am in agreement. I'm a big pro indie supporter. Um, I know you have to go to a recording session because you're a busy narrator. We want you narrating. But I wanted to say thank you. I
Oh,
wanted to encourage your fans to write in
yes, please
as
do.
now that they now know it's not that you were ignoring them, but you just did not know about Facebook Messenger. I will link in the show notes your socials, your website,
Thank
your
you.
public domain collection, et cetera, and how folks can get in touch with you. And I like to close out my episodes with one question for my guests. So I'll ask you this. What would you like to be true 12 months from now?
What would I like? Say that again.
What would you like to be true 12 months from now?
In the world or in my life? Either way, I
Either.
was just going to leave the question. Okay. 12 months from now,
So that would be May 2026.
May 2026, I have 3 projects that I'm working on. I would like to see 2 of those 3, at least, come to fruition 12 months from now.
We're going to make it happen. We're
Okay.
manifesting it right here on
Yes.
the Writer Unblocked podcast. All right, Art, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will talk soon.
We will. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. For more information on today's episode, please check out the show notes or go to writerunblockedpodcast.com. Before we wrap up, if today's episode sparked ideas for your author career, don't let them sit in your head. Take action. If you are ready for high impact support, I offer one-on-one strategy sessions to help authors like you navigate your author business with precision. Head to reignitewithnicole.com to book a session or apply for any of my author programs. And if you found this episode valuable, please share it with a fellow writer and leave a review. Thanks for listening to Writer Unblocked, and I will see you next time.